I'm not a climate scientist, and I do not play one on television. Anyway, but I'm certainly somebody that's been very concerned about what I've been reading about and seeing going on with the climate, and felt that it's incumbent upon me as a citizen to try to distill what I'm learning and talk about it to other people. I'm a guy who's been a Mac user since 1984, and the IBM ad, the attack on IBM converted me, and I'm also going to say that I've been a Apple shareholder on and off since 1991. So I'm deeply enmeshed in the Apple ecosystem, and very glad that I am. And so the talk I'm going to go through today has got basically three sections. One is about climate change. It's real, it's a real problem, and showing some of the information about that. Hopefully it's not going to be redundant to what people already know. I find that it's useful to me to study the science behind the climate change theory, so that I, really get an understanding of it beyond just listening to the experts. I'm never going to be an expert, but maybe I can learn something more every day about it. The second thing I want to talk about is the response of our company, and here's our new headquarters for Apple, Apple Park, which I'm going to say some more about. But the response from Apple and from many other organizations, and from many governmental units as well, has been incredibly positive. And Apple is really in the vanguard. And I think that being the user of Apple products, we've really got something to feel proud about in what this company has done. And they've got plenty more to do, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about what strategies are available to us as individuals that we can act upon to the extent that we are convinced of climate change and concerned about it. There are lots of different things that we can do that kind of, at the individual level, can reflect the sort of things that companies like Apple are doing at the large organizational level. The general statement is that the warming of the climate is pretty unequivocal as far as science is concerned. It's not unequivocal as far as politicians are concerned. It's not unequivocal as far as the general populace is concerned. But in terms of what the scientific community has to say about it, it comes out, over and over again with this great concern. So here's a report, a summary report from about 3 years ago from the American Meteorological Society. American Meteorological Society, interesting group. It's been around for 100 years, 99 actually. It's got 13,000 climate scientists, meteorologists, people who study the oceans, who study the weather cycle, etc. And they have made a very strong statement of concern, which is representative of what multiple national and international scientific organizations are saying about climate change. I just highlighted this one thing right here in red, that atmospheric CO2 concentration has been increasing at a rate much faster than any time in 800,000 years. And so we're going to talk about CO2 and how it affects the warming of the planet. The compilation of all these reports you can find at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration site that by searching on the term scientific consensus, you can see what all 18 of these different international, national organizations have to say about it. And so global warming, climate, and the climate change that is resulting from global warming comes out of a concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, gases that trap heat. Now, we need greenhouse gases. If we didn't have greenhouse gases, we'd be frozen, period. And so for many, basically tens of thousands of years, I think, I can't remember when the last ice age was, but I think it was maybe, it was 50,000 years ago, something like that. But since then, we've been in a pretty stable state on this planet system called Earth, where there's been, the sun radiates the planet, light and heat reflect off the planet, a little bit gets re-radiated, and it's captured by this layer of greenhouse gases. Most of the heat has been escaping into space. But it's been a good way to live for a long time. But in the last 250 years, that's been changing. And the reason it's been changing is that there's been an increase in these greenhouse gases, in particular carbon dioxide, which comes from the burning of fossil fuels. The fuels that are lighting our screen, that enabled us to get here today. The energy system that we've come to rely upon is also the energy system which is causing some problems for us. And what's happening is that these gases are capturing more heat in the atmosphere than they used to, radiating that heat back to the Earth, warming the Earth and the oceans. And this is kind of a basic feedback loop about how global warming works. Earth is getting hotter, and therefore all the ways that the Earth has to cool itself have been sort of declining. The sea is holding more heat. It's melting the Arctic and Antarctic ice caps, and that lessens the ability of the Earth to reflect heat, which means the Earth gets hotter. And a couple of graphics about what that looks like. So the outline in red is where the summer Antarctic sea ice boundary was in 1979. This is a picture that you currently see, and I think it dates back from, it's either 2012 or 2014. And to look at it just a little more graphically, here's what it looked like in 1980, the Arctic ice cap, and here's what it looks like in 2012. Now, the importance of this is multifold. If the ice in Greenland alone melts, the sea level of the Earth as a totality will rise by 10 feet. And the ice in Greenland is unfortunately on track to melt pretty much by the end of this century. And it melts and it creates sort of darker water because it's cold at the outset. It creates darker water, which absorbs more heat, which puts that same feedback loop that I was showing you into its cycle. I want to say that, for myself, this is one of these things, and you guys already know this stuff too, may feel this way too, that the more I know, the more I wish I knew less. You know what I'm saying? So you start to look at what happens if more and more ice in the places where we've had permafrost and permanent ice caps melts, that's not good news. And this is, I don't want to bore you too much with too much of this stuff. I never know what's too much or not, not enough. But yeah, the ocean is a big carbon sink. All right, so it holds carbon, and this is sort of the natural cycle through photosynthesis and through the natural transmission of water vapor. There's been for many hundreds of thousands of years kind of a basic exchange between the Earth and the oceans and the atmosphere. So photosynthesis and other decaying of the carbon containing life substances. By the way, we're mostly carbon. We're significantly carbon. So that gives off like 439 gigatons, and it absorbs 450 gigatons of carbon. Oceans have a sort of similar thing. And then the problem is over here on the left with the fossil fuels that we've been burning, and we're burning right now at the rate of about 30 gigatons of fossil fuel a year, and about 40% of that fossil fuel, of the CO2 generated from the burning of fossil fuels remains in the atmosphere. That's been accumulating. It's now like a big block of carbon, think like a huge coal mine in the sky. And this just shows something about where photosynthesis is. So there's a real connection between, going back, this has been tracked for about over 100 years, looking at concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the temperature of the planet. Now, people sometimes say, well, how do we know what the temperature of the planet is? I have to ask that question. I wondered about that. And it turns out that there are 100,000 temperature thermometers on the Earth alone, let alone what's in the oceans. So scientists are every day accumulating this information. They can tell you the temperature of the Earth today. So it's not like a guess that's being put forward here. So there's a direct connection between the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. So it could be a big box. They say, okay, there's 1 million parts, of the gas called atmosphere, which is broken down into several different gases. That and then you go in and count those 1 million parts. Here's like 400 parts turn out to be CO2, and for all of those parts of the atmosphere that are increasing in CO2, we're getting this increase in the temperature of the Earth, and even slight increases in the temperature of the Earth can have a very dramatic impact on life on the Earth. So, for example, that many animal and plant species cannot survive at 42 degrees centigrade. Right? They won't be able to persist. There's all kinds of problems between when flowers bloom and when pollinators, bees, find those flowers. So there's a kind of whole, so it's a system. And one of the clearest signs of climate change is rain. Right? So the warmer the air is and the warmer the water is, the more intense hurricanes are, because warmer water evaporates more quickly, makes for bigger storm systems, and we unfortunately experienced that here in Naples a few months ago. Look at this, 15.8 inches per hour were dumped on Naples during a one point in time of Hurricane Irma. And in Cuba, that kind of fire hose of rain existed for a day and a half. So that's kind of, warmer air, warmer water, more water in the atmosphere, more water falling to the earth. Not a good story. And these are pictures that I took from the Naples Daily News, but I don't know exactly where these spots are, so I can't, but I presume they're in Naples. Now, so I make the argument, and a lot of other people are making the argument, there's no question about climate change. There's a question about what to do about it, and one of the leaders in what to do about it is this company, Apple Computing. And let's take a look at what they have to say here. Sort of as a general statement about where Apple is.
Is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena.
These are all taken by iPhones.
In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the only home we've ever known.
So that's kind of an overall statement of principle by Apple. And, one of the things that's really exciting about the company is that it's asking really big questions, in my opinion. And by the way, my background is as an organization scientist, or somebody who studies how organizations learn, how they think. And one of the key ways to be a great organization is to think big and to think different, as Steve would say. And so his company is persistent in that level of inquiry. So can we power a global business with the sun, wind, and water alone? No fossil fuels. Can we get 100% of our supply chain to become 100% renewable energy? Can we one day stop mining the earth altogether? Now, you got to imagine, if Apple could figure out a way, could achieve a way, that it does not use extraction from the earth for any of its products, or for any of its own power sources, the kind of impact that the world's biggest company, the world's highest, what's that right phrase, market capitalization. That's more powerful. That's more for Apple to accomplish its objectives here would be more powerful than what almost any government could do. Right? And it would be private sector. So it's great to have the private sector asking this kind of question. Now, they say here, can we use only 100% recyclable materials? And there are people who say, Apple likes to talk about things, but it's got a long way to go. Well, it does have a way to go. These are all from Apple products, and we had to clear out a bunch of our closets. in a condominium, and I realized, just pass it around. And I realized I had, this constitutes about, I'm almost ashamed to say this constitutes about 1/10 of the boxes that I had of Apple products that have been accumulated in my apartment. You know, Annika says, can you get these out here, please? And so, so these are, you know, the company has a ways to go, but it wants to get there.
So what those boxes, are they recycled?
No, these cannot be, I mean, some of it can be, some of what Apple does can be recycled. You can certainly recycle your phones and et cetera. But I just found in going through these boxes, by the way, you don't have to keep them. I'll take them back and figure out what to do with them. But you know, I just found, like, this is lofty rhetoric, what we'd like, and they still got a ways to go. You know, just like you never get there. George, you were saying something.
Well, those are recycled?
No, these are not recyclable.
Nah.
They're not recyclable, to my knowledge. Go ahead.
Why is it necessary to ship a phone in a box like that? Why can't you just put it in a much simpler wrapping without all of the little compartments for this piece and that piece? Why can't you just ship the phone? We don't need all those other, all that compartmentalized.
Marketing.
Tim, I got somebody else to talk about. No, it's a very good question. Exactly.
But I mean, why can't we as Apple consumers let Apple know we don't want all that?
You can, absolutely. And hold on to that thought, because I'm going to get to the wrap up. We're going to talk more about that sort of thing. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I have an opinion on that.
Okay.
To me, Apple from the get-go has taken pride in presentation and ergonomics and rounded corners and those kinds of things. And that's been a priority for them, you know, the rise of Johnny Ive and you know, glass enclosed headquarters. And so I think style has always been a priority for Apple. I'm not sure that the ecology has always been a priority.
But interesting point. And, you know, and so, but I think Apple's working on ecological design. You know, great design, great ecology. But, you know, so it's a big challenge. Any other questions at this point? I'll just go ahead. So, I mean, Apple's doing a great job. It's saving a tremendous amount of carbon from going into the atmosphere, but it's got a long way to go, right? It releases approximately 30 million metric tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere as of 2016. Right? So that's the kind of challenge that the company has, but at least it is going after that challenge.
Is there any way to know what, you know, if you normalize it against, say, amount of money, you know, spent on Apple products, or some product production metric, how does this number compare to what General Motors does, for example, per dollar on that they come in, or, you know, any other big company? Is this comparable? Is this a small impact? Is it a big impact?
It's a very good question. I don't have a good answer. I don't have a good answer to it. It's something I'd like to research. My assumption is that because of its consciousness, it's going to be a much lower impact per product than many other organizations we can name. But that's a really good comparison. And if I were Apple, I'd be looking to make that comparison because it's going to help sell into the market that it already has. But so it's still releasing a lot of greenhouse gases, but it knows it. You know, it's transparent about it. It's got just a lot of things that are renewable. And you know, I'm not here as an Apple sales guy or anything. I'm just like glad to see that this company that has such an impact on my life is also caring about some of the same things that I care about. So they reduced their emissions by 585,000 metric tons, which in 2016, which is what? It's about 3%. Like quick, you know, about 2.5%, something like that, of their total emissions in that same year. So they got, you know, plenty, they're doing something, but they've got plenty of ways to go. Apple Park, has anybody been to Apple Park yet? I'm getting to me.
Have you been there?
No, I have not, but you know, I'm looking forward to my pilgrimage. You know, it's like, you know, some people want to go to.
Can one just walk up there and walk in, do you have to make previous?
I'm sure they have a whole tour. You know.
No, they don't have a tour. I talked to my son-in-law who was recently there. They only let you basically into the visitor center, period. And that's as far as you can get.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. I was at Google's headquarters 2 years ago. That was pretty exciting for me. One of the things was that they had a lineup for electric car charging. It was sort of about as big as this room, with, you know, charger in the middle, and then all kinds of people having their cars lined up there. But you couldn't get in to take a real tour of Google. So, you know, but these companies are, they're going to want to let a lot of people know what they're doing, because it's, you know, it's very good for their PR. But I have not been there, but I do know that it's going to be one of the largest leaders in energy and environmental design in the United States, and they planted 9,000 drought-tolerant trees. They're really, you know, doing some good thinking about that.
What is a drought-tolerant tree?
Right, well, that's a tree, but say anybody else, an arborologist can answer that question. What's a drought-tolerant tree?
Silk.
Say again?
Silk.
Silk. Silk.
Well,
I mean, you know, let's see. So, let's see, I was just reading about this a couple of days ago. I'm glad you asked the question. I just got to remember what I was reading. Well, that's another good question. I wish I
Well,
had
certain trees, like any other organisms, have adapted to their environment, so they require more or less
Right.
sunlight, or more or less rain, or more or less nutrients, or more or less any other thing that they need to survive. And I guess they have found trees which can survive under needing less moisture than their predecessors might have had in that area. So they have planted those kind of trees.
And California has been experiencing severe droughts.
Now, the downside of that is that droughts come and go, and floods come and go, and excess rain comes and goes. So if you plant trees which survive on low water, on waters, years of high rainfall, those trees suffer. I mean, they rot, or they die from too much rain. So it's not always the best thing to do to plant drought-resistant crops or trees, because they pay a big price on the years of heavy rain.
Yeah, so I would presume that, you know, an analysis that has been made, some sort of forward-thinking analysis has been made about what's the kind of ecology that we should have around the park. Now, that's also a bet. You know, anytime you do anticipatory thinking, you're betting on the analysis that you've gone through. But it's a good question, and come back next year and I'm going to have a better answer. So, okay. And the company is engaged in extensive supply chain management. It's going to its suppliers and improving their climate-sensitive approaches. And its goal is a closed-loop supply chain where all products are built using only renewable resources and recycled materials. So basically, there's no carbon footprint by the world's biggest corporation. That's its goal. That's whether they can get there, question, of course. And then there are plenty of critics who are saying, Apple's doing a lot of greenwashing, and if you look closely, you'll find all kinds of things to critique. Fair enough, I'm sure that's true. But still, there's the ambition, the goal. And so I got this information that I just presented to you from the Apple Environmental Responsibility Report for 2017. It's available online. Quite fascinating if this is a topic of interest to you. Any other questions at this point?
Apple's doing, apparently doing what they can. How does that compare to the other companies that are just saying, hey, the heck with it? We'll just use resources until they run out. So you're talking a drop compared to a flood.
Well, that's an important question, and the fact is that what Apple is doing is an example of a really, it's a worldwide effort to have greater sensitivity to human impact on the climate. Now, a lot of folks, as I say here, entrenched interests are threatening and pushing back, and a lot of entrenched interests, one way to think about that is like, so it's going in a different way. So Annika and I were, last year we were in France, right? And we were in this old town, and they had streets that were sort of curved toward the center. And the reason they were curved toward the center was because people just threw their waste out into the street. It's like, okay, we did what we did, now to hell with it, it goes out in the street, and it's not somebody else to worry about it. And a lot of people treat the atmosphere, and a lot of companies treat the atmosphere in that way. And that's part of it, and that's part of the entrenched interest. It's like, we've done things the way we do it, and we don't want to change it. Right? But on the other hand, there is a huge effort to change. And just what we're saying. And so if we look at, at the national level, this drive toward climate sensitivity is not happening in the United States right now. But certainly is happening in China, and happening in other places, and certainly happening at the state level, etc. Go ahead, what were you saying?
Well, the bottom line with capitalism is to sell your product. So, let's just say that Apple had no interest in the environment at all, and just went ahead and made the best, cheapest product they could make, irrespective of its impact on the environment. And Dell made a computer which was absolutely met all the goals that Apple has set out. Completely renewable, no impact on the environment whatsoever. How many people in this room would switch to a Dell product because of their environmental concern? I doubt very many.
So that's, we can take a poll and find that out. But, and let's say that there's obviously a lot of truth in that. It's also true that we all pay more for Apple products right now than we do for comparable products, right? Because of a whole variety of reasons, and one of which is that we know that this is a company that has got real design sensitivity. And part of having design sensitivity is having awareness of how your products are engaging the overall environment. Now, I'm not going to argue about positive capitalism is a positive force or a negative force. That's that. But I'm just saying that the climate that we're in right now, the damage that humans are doing to the overall condition of the atmosphere is something that farsighted organizations and farsighted organizations and people are responding to.
But my point is that I doubt very many people in this room, or very many people in this country, or maybe very many people in this world, buy a product because of the impact of that product on the environment. I mean, they buy the product because they like the product. They like the product. We buy Apple products because we like something about Apple that makes us pay a bonus, an extra to have Apple products. And we would do that whether Apple is environmentally sensitive or not, I guess. I mean, we would buy, we may or may not buy a car based upon its impact on the environment, as we might buy an electric car or a hybrid car, because of its effect on the environment. A lot of people buy hybrid cars because they truly are worried about the impact of the car on the environment.
Do you have a question?
Right.
Yeah, we aren't here for a controversial
Thank you.
situation. We want some information.
From you.
So, fair enough. But I think it's an interesting point has been raised by your name, sir?
My name is Alan Weinstein.
Okay, Alan has raised an interesting point for us to reflect upon. I'm going to take it at that and move on. Thanks, Alan. So what do we need to achieve? And I've got 7 minutes to achieve it in. We need to achieve, in order to address the, in my view, crisis of climate change, we need to decrease our emissions, our carbon emissions by 2% a year in order to achieve an 80% reduction in emission levels by 2050. An 80% reduction gives us a 75% chance, not the whole chance, but a 75% chance of keeping global warming below the 3.5 degree Fahrenheit increase. That if we get past that, we're going to start to get really dramatic and extremely unpleasant consequences to climate change. We're going to get plenty of them just with a 3.5 degree increase. So a bunch of states and municipalities are doing this, but are taking action on this. But we need to change, right? Ultimately, it's us that need to go through the change. And someone, I think she was saying, well, why can't we, demand that companies do this, that, or the other thing? Well, we can, right? And in fact, we have to. And so I just very quickly want to talk about 7 steps toward action that are recommended and considered by an organization that I'm a member of called Elders Climate Action, and I'm going to go through these very quickly. And this is not anything, I'm not saying, you have to do any one of these things. These are just like being put in front of you to consider for your own action. So one is talk to others. Do you know, I'm sure that you don't, but that only 1 out of every 5 Americans has ever had a conversation, not even a conversation, has ever heard about climate change from another individual? 20%. Only 20% have ever had the conversation of any sort. So, big thing to do is get yourself informed to some extent and start talking to people about it. Second, understand your own carbon footprint. There are lots of things that we can do to reduce the amount of CO2 that our household is putting into the atmosphere. One very simple thing to do is to eat. If you eat meat every day, if you eat red meat every day, have one day when you don't eat red meat. And if you start understanding what goes into animal agriculture and the amount of carbon that is emitted to produce a hamburger, then you can kind of just, okay, let's just have one day when I don't do that. Use public transportation, demand public transportation. And these things, a lot of these recommendations are going to be in the slide pack, which will be distributed to you. Eco restoration, basically your soil, the health of the soil is a carbon sink. The healthier the soil is, the more carbon it absorbs from the atmosphere. Want to know one of the best things you can do to address climate change? Plant a tree. And because photosynthesis takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and turns it into oxygen and sugar. So more trees, think about what's the level of development that's going on. Become a climate voter. So if climate is a concern to you, take that into the voting booth. And this is not a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Socialist, you name it, kind of question. It's a climate, it's a science question. Do anybody know people know who George Shultz is? All right, or do you know who, what's his name, James Baker is? All right, and Henry Paulson, less well known, Henry Paulson was Secretary of Treasurer to George W. Bush. So the three of them last year formed a consortium to tax carbon and to redistribute the taxes in a form of dividend. So these are. This is not it's not a partisan issue. Science, the Earth is not flat. That's not a partisan question. Get involved. One of the best ways for an individual to be effective is to be connected to other individuals in the form of an organization. I want to mention the Citizens Climate Lobby, which Bob Kelly, would you raise your hand? Okay, enables MUG member. All right, it's also a member of the Citizen Climate Lobby. That's here in Florida and in Naples. The Everglades Foundation. The Everglades is a huge carbon sink. Save the Everglades. Pay attention to the Everglades. Elders Climate Action. They just want to be down here 5 months out of the year, but maybe there's something I could get going with other people. They're national organizations. There are so many opportunities to get involved in addressing the climate situation. Start thinking about where you're putting your money and where organizations that are your pension fund or your mutual funds, where are they putting their money? And can you start advocating that they become more oriented toward these climate issues? And also, we have a right to assemble here in the United States. Right? And you can protest. You can be part of mass gatherings that focus on the climate. So, for example, on April the 14th, there will be a March for Science on a national basis here in the United States. Right? And if you've never been to a large demonstration, it will be quite an experience. And you find that there are all different kinds of people who come from a range of perspectives, but who believe in science. I think this is my last slide coming up here. More information. Here are some things that I've mentioned. Just punch in climate change on Google and you'll get a lot. But these are some sources that I found useful. And I'll just close and say, we are facing a choice. We couldn't face a clearer choice as a species. and it's a species who is running the show on this planet. And you know, what kind of world do we want to leave to our kids and our grandchildren and to future generations? Do we want to leave one that's cracked, where people are going to have to, you know, groveling to survive, or one that flourishes in a natural environment that, you know, the Garden of Eden that we got to have? So we have choices. And so one thing to be thinking about is, if you came to agree with the science, what did you decide to do once you achieved that agreement? That's it. Thank you.
Any questions?
Back in the back.
Could you talk a little bit about Apple? And I have Googled a couple of articles. One was about green bonds and then some of their solar projects. I also just wanted to say that we have at least 3 members here as part of the Unitarian Church that
Absolutely.
has a very active climate community. The Climate Change Lobby gathers there, and one of your guests, Barbara Glasgow, is in charge of the Green Sanctuary. We're hosting a film on April 15th about activists fighting offshore drilling. The public is invited to that at noon. And then you mentioned about the April 14th march. I believe there's a national march June 8th, isn't there, for the oceans? It's saving our water.
Yep. Yep.
So
I mean,
my first question was really about green bonds.
yeah. Well, I mean, there certainly are lots of green investment opportunities. Now, you need to, you know, look at the details, and you need to look at your own financial situation. But I invest in something called the Guggenheim Solar Fund, which is a mutual fund that's got, you know, investments in companies that do solar installations around the world. There are, you know, lots and lots of ways to do that. And one of the best things people can do is, if you have an investment analyst that you work with, or an investment advisor that you work with, call those people up and say, I want to see green offerings, and I want you to give me a comparison about what a green choice is going to make to the condition of my portfolio. That's a fair question. So, I mean, so I have to.
No, I just saw a headline saying that Apple, I think it was a year.
Oh, yes, no, I see what you're, yes. Oh, Apple is definitely, it's getting a $1.5 billion bond issue that is going to go toward green investments in Apple. Is that what you're referring?
Yeah.
I think that's what you're referring to. Yeah. So that's and that's another example, you know, and which certainly influences, you know, one's brand loyalty. At least this one's brand loyalty. You know, you were saying something.
Yeah, the Apple spaceship says it's 100% renewable. Does that mean that it's all on-site? I mean, they have the solar panels on that
Yes.
building?
Yes.
Power the entire
You
place?
know, and again, I'd like to do a better job. So Apple says that the park is 100% renewable. Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have as good information about that as I would like to right now, but.
I know there's no geothermal there, and there's no running water falls and stuff, so it must all be solar.
It's got a huge solar installation that's powering it. But it's, you know, it really uses a lot of natural light, and they've done a heck of a lot of thinking about it. But it's a good question that I should have a better answer for, and if I come back again, I'll have a better answer.
Thank you.
Michael, I have a comment or a question. I'm looking at that particular picture, and it occurs to me that there are cities on this globe that were with about 30 million inhabitants each, or more, and these cities are growing. And if I think about it, there are probably more than 30 of such big cities. So 1 billion of our world's population lives in an area that never see any green grass. So I wonder how the whole subject relates to those people, and there are bigger numbers already and growing, who live in big cities. I mean, this is a serious issue, I think. We are maybe driven by nostalgia or by emotions, but look at the facts. There are people that never see the ocean, that never see anything green. They just live in big cities with concrete around them. And so we have to think about that also.
It's getting hotter. It's getting a lot hotter there.
Yeah.
Just 1 second, Bob. So, I mean, not only are there people living in very dry places that are getting hotter, but there are also, most of the world's population, I think it's like 40%, I can't, so let's just use the term 40%, live within 60% of, within 60 miles of coastlines, such as us, right here. And you get a 10-foot sea level rise, the impact that that's going to have on places like Jakarta, southern Florida, New York City, Boston, San Francisco, a lot of places that you know, that a lot of folks call home are unfortunately in jeopardy. So
How much above sea level are we right here, right now?
not much. Our place is 5 foot above sea level. You know, and it's a big worry, for sure. Bob, you were going to say something?
Yeah, hi. My name is Bob Kelly. I'm going to stand up if I can. I'm not only a member of NMUG, I'm a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby here in Naples, which is part of a nationwide organization. It has twofold objectives right now that I can speak about. One is encouraging Congress to pass the tax law on carbon, the tax carbon usage and trading. The second thing that they're doing is they've managed to build a coalition of members of Congress to support issues of climate change, and the requirement is that they want only pairs of members of Congress, and each pair has to be from the opposing party. They've got 70 pairs right now of Republicans and Democrats tied together who will focus on climate as an issue in Congress, which I think is pretty novel in today's world, the way that we move today.
That's great.
Second point I'd like to make, back in the Citizen Climate Lobby, I have some brochures that I just happen to have with me on the Citizen Climate Lobby. And I'm going to put them up here on the table if anyone wants to take some. We meet once a month. Scientists come to the meetings. And it's pretty exciting stuff. But last night, there was a debate in Miami at Miami International University School of Journalism. And you can find it on Facebook. The debate. It was an hour and 40 minutes debate between a climate denier of some fame and the president of the Citizens Climate Lobby in Miami. And one of the points that came up, it was at the School of Journalism, the audience was all journalist students, people going to decide how to write about the climate and how to present the points and the arguments. Somebody in the audience raised a question. They said, insurance companies, FEMA, are pretty well known for calculating risk. They have to calculate risk because that's how they survive. They have to know what the risk is of what the investments are. Is anything being done in the insurance companies, and what would be the effect if they started realizing that climate change was happening and was going to impact our environment? I personally know that FEMA is redoing all the sea level or the heights here. I just went out, I live up in the vineyards, I just went out to get flood insurance, and I was told I'm going to be in a high-risk zone according to FEMA. And I'm trying to find out more of that. So, if that happens, and what the response was, that if people start charging more for insurance, or denying insurance, property values go down, and then we'll all hit. It's not a matter of saying, oh gee, I don't know what to do about it, nobody's doing anything, we got to do something. You come to the Citizens Climate Lobby, come join us. Come watch, take pictures, use your apples. It's really good. Thank you.
Here, here.
I just say that it's not a surprise to me as a long-term Apple guy, that I would come to an Apple meeting and have two members of two organizations working on climate issues address my fellow members of this organization. So, any other questions? Oh, what's your name, please?
I'm Barbara Glasgow. I'm interested in the Elders for Climate.
Elders Climate Action. Yes.
Yeah, that you mentioned. Is that a functioning organization here in Naples now?
Well, you're looking at the organization. It's a national organization. We have, at this point, I think we have 5 chapters. I live in Massachusetts. I'm a member of the leadership team of Elders Climate Action in Massachusetts, and we're quite active up there. I'd love to get a chapter going down here, and Barbara, you can talk about how to make that happen. ECA, the objective of the ECA is to mobilize elders. And elders, it's like there's a difference between being an elder and being old. So an elder is a person that has wisdom, has distilled something from their life experience, and who understands that they have a legacy that they're going to leave behind, and care about that legacy and care about the people who are coming up behind them. So Elders Climate Action is about identifying people who think of themselves as elders and mobilizing them to become climate activists.
So what's the difference between an elder and an old?
For me, I'm sure there are good studies of this, but for me, somebody who's an elder is what kids would call woke. You're alive. You know you're alive. You have a continued sense of purpose in your life, and you whatever your condition is, you're still embracing the dance of life.
Young at heart, they used to go.
Yeah, well, that's true too, yeah. But, a lot of people who are young at heart, a lot of people who are young could learn from being old at heart, or being elderly at heart. And people, I think, who are, who I use the term old, are like, they've turned off the receiver. They're not, they're just marking time until it's over. And so that's a choice.
Any other questions? Thank you.